This is AMTV. Hello there everyone, and welcome to part 19 of this series looking at the history and impact of Doctor Who viewing figures. If you're joining us for the very first time, a very warm welcome to you. We hope you stick around for future instalments and check out our previous episodes. We've covered the first 4 Doctor's eras, in which you can enjoy them in either episodic or compilation form, but for now, sit back, relax, and join me once again as we delve back into the wonderfully niche world of Doctor Who viewing figures. Our destination? Season 19. It's the Christmas of 1981, and Doctor Who was gearing up for another imminent return to television screens, its 19th season beginning in the January of 1982. But with this new run of adventures, several new changes were being showcased for the first time. Producer John Nathan Turner had already overhauled Doctor Who massively the previous year, with Season 18 bringing in new titles, a new version of the theme tune, a new look for the Doctor and the TARDIS, and a whole slew of new companions, as well as a brand new incarnation of the Malevolent Master. But that season also saw the departure of 4th Doctor, Tom Baker, bowing out after an unprecedented 7-year streak. The man to replace him was Peter Davison. Cast at the age of 29, Davison was the youngest actor yet to take on the role, and many viewers and critics cited that he was, in fact, too young, despite only seeing a few seconds of him on screen. I wonder if that would ever repeat itself in the show's future. But despite any criticisms, the new 5th Doctor, together with his 3 companions, Adric, Nyssa and Tegan, began their new adventures through time and space, and would encounter brand new enemies, as well as a few familiar faces along the way. However, things would be a little different. For the first time in its 18-year history, Doctor Who wouldn't be broadcast in its traditional Saturday tea time slot. There were 2 major reasons behind this, one being that Season 18 had fared disastrously in that particular time slot against strong competition, and the second being that the BBC was studying early evening weekday viewing to eventually launch a new soap opera. As such, to broadcast Doctor Who in this way would be a good test for the Beeb in both their study and also to see whether the programme could continue to prove popular despite the new day and time slot. But did this shift work? Or would it continue to push viewing figures ever lower for Doctor Who? And what about John Nathan Turner? If he was all about bringing in the new, then what did he have up his sleeve for his second season as producer? Well, let's dive right into Season 19 and find out. The first story from Season 19 is Castrovalva. The Doctor's regeneration is failing. Narrowly escaping death at the hands of the Master, the time travellers take refuge in Castrovalva, where not all is as it seems. A dark plan could end the 5th Doctor's life before it has even begun. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 4th of January 1982 and concluded on the 12th of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and well, what can I say, this is much more like it. A massive improvement when compared to the opener for Season 18, The Leisure Hive, which couldn't even crack 6 million viewers. Castrovalva, on the other hand, has all of its episodes attain more than 8 million viewers, with parts 3 and 4 even crossing over the coveted 10 million mark, finishing with 10.2 and 10.4 million households tuning in respectively. For the top 40 TV programmes chart, whilst no episode managed to crack it, some of them came very close. Parts 3 and 4 in particular did come the closest, charting at 47th and 46th respectively. So how did Castrovalva manage to catapult Doctor Who's viewing figures back into the highs of the Tom Baker era? Well, let's go to one of our regular factors that we analyse in this series: promotion. With the arrival of Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor, promotion for the programme remained just as present for the start of its first series as it had been for his casting announcement back in late 1980. The Radio Times, the leading listings magazine, whilst not giving Doctor Who the coveted front cover, dedicated one of its main pages with a colour photo of Davison with the TARDIS and a lengthy article promoting the start of Season 19 on BBC One. It's quite a shame that Doctor Who didn't get a Radio Times front cover for this moment. The series hadn't received one since the mid-70s, and even by 1982, a programme gaining the spot on the front cover was quite the achievement and a very helpful marketing boost. However, promotional efforts for Doctor Who were firing just as much on TV as they were in the print world, the shining example being an appearance from Peter Davison on leading Saturday morning children's show The Multicoloured Swap Shop, which aired halfway through Castrovalva's broadcast run. But what about the other main factor we look at, competition? ITV had absolutely triumphed over Doctor Who the previous year, thanks to the extreme popularity of American sci-fi import Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. But now, with Doctor Who going out on Mondays and Tuesdays as opposed to Saturdays, could the other side triumph again? Well, on Mondays, the Time Lord was facing off against the holiday programme, Wish You Were Here, and on Tuesdays, first Give Us a Clue for Part 2, and then Emmerdale Farm in most regions for Part 4. Despite the popularity of ITV soap, the fact that Part 4 of Castrovalva still had more than 10 million viewers tuning in is quite impressive. Outside of promotion and competition, I think there are a few more unique factors that helped the Fifth Doctor attain such a strong debut. For one, the arrival of a new Doctor prompted a certain kind of buzz amongst the viewing public. It's fair to say that the idea of a new Doctor was common knowledge, and given Davison's popularity with audiences in programmes such as All Creatures Great and Small, I think it's reasonable to suggest that a great deal more people would have tuned in out of curiosity to see how the man they knew as friendly Yorkshire vet Tristan transitioned over to piloting the TARDIS. We'll have to see as we go. Castrovalva in itself is quite a fascinating story. It's a new kind of tale like no other in my view, and for that reason it stands out quite strongly. Despite the first 2 episodes largely featuring the leads in the TARDIS, the concepts and ideas explored are really unique and new territory for the programme. Christopher H. Bidmead, the script editor last season, returns to pen Castrovalva, just as he had written the swan song for the 4th Doctor, Logopolis. And whilst I did love Logopolis for its more sombre tone, Castrovalva feels like a breath of fresh air. We have a new Doctor, full of energy, raring to go, and overall the story has an air of jubilation and joy to it, that in many ways I felt was lacking from the previous season. The 3 companions continue to expand their dynamic with each other, and indeed the new Doctor, whilst Anthony Ainley's presence as the Master continues to be both maniacal and very entertaining to watch. I would say all Doctor's first stories are a must-watch, and with Castrovalva, there's absolutely no exception. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9.6 million viewers, a huge 4.5 increase from the previous season opener, The Leisure Hive. It's clear to see that the change in broadcast date and time slot, the relatively weaker competition, strong promotion, and the arrival of a new Doctor all jointly contributed to giving Castrovalva these impressive numbers. And it also meant that Season 19 started off with a huge bang rather than the whimper we experienced last year. Some of the concepts outlined in Castrovalva may have been a bit too tricky or elaborate for the production team to realise, mainly due to the technical restraints and budgets of the time, but having said that, we do get a solid adventure in 4 parts. Peter is the Doctor almost from the word go, and in his recovery to finding his costume, pacing about Castrovalva, he really succeeds in crafting a character all his own right within his very first story. And if you want to witness this fresh start for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1983, or its audio adaptation from 2010. To watch it, you have the VHS release from 1992, and also a DVD release from 2007, packaged together with The Keeper of Traken and Logopolis as part of the New Beginnings box set. The Fifth Doctor's debut can also be enjoyed on Blu-ray, as part of the Season 19 collection set, released in 2018. It may not be to everyone's taste, as some find it dull or a bit too ambitious, but I love Castrovalva for what it represents. It represents a major change, a fresh start for our leading character, a chance to recapture the sense of wonder that exploring the universe holds, whilst providing great moments of wit, humour, and drama. Definitely watch it if you haven't seen it before, and whether you love it or hate it, I doubt it's one that you'll forget in a hurry.
That's the trouble with regeneration. You never quite know what you're going to get.
The second story from Season 19 is 4 to Doomsday. Aboard a vast starship en route to Earth, the Doctor encounters the frog-like Urbankans and their leader, Monarch. The ship's passengers are drawn from different Earth cultures, but what secret do they possess? And what is Monarch's true purpose? This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 18th of January 1982 and concluded on the 26th of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and things seem to have decreased somewhat from the previous story. No episode this time makes it over 10 million, but that doesn't mean what 4 to Doomsday did achieve wasn't impressive. All episodes like Castrovalva pulled in over 8 million viewers, and the peak of the story comes with Part 4, which had 9.4 million households watching. Not bad at all for a Tuesday evening. When looking at the top 40 programmes, Doctor Who sadly was falling further behind from that benchmark. Part 4 came the closest, finishing at 53rd, with Part 1 falling the furthest away at 66th place. Hopefully we won't have all of Season 19's stories miss the top 40, which is sadly what occurred in the previous set of stories. So if Castrovalva provided a really strong start for the Fifth Doctor's inaugural year, what was it about 4 to Doomsday to cause those numbers to begin slipping? Well, one factor that could have definitely contributed would be the promotion. Or should I say, the lack of promotion. In the print world, 4 to Doomsday only received one monochrome photo of the Monarch, which was printed alongside the listings for Part 3. That aside, there was no special articles, no interviews with guest stars or the leads, and even on television, there was virtually nothing to promote 4 to Doomsday, outside of the normal continuity announcements and lineup previews. Competition over at ITV was for the most part exactly what had faced Castrovalva. Wish You Were Here on Mondays, and now predominantly Emmerdale Farm on Tuesdays. And whilst the soap was very popular, it was yet to broadcast all year round as it does now, and yet attain the massive surge in audiences it would receive thanks to a revamp in the late 1980s. This arguably offers a reason as to why 4 to Doomsday, and Doctor Who as a whole, was able to go toe-to-toe with Emmerdale at this time, rather than suffering a crushing defeat to a more major soap opera like Coronation Street. But more on that when we get there. Whilst 4 to Doomsday may have had one of the worst promotional runs of the last few years, does that mean that the story itself is worth passing over? Well, I think it's fair to say that some people would say yes. This story does have some interesting ideas, but a lot of the time feels like the actors are running about the studio with not a great deal happening. Interestingly, 4 to Doomsday was the first story of Season 19 to be recorded, meaning that this was the first time that Peter Davison was getting the chance to play and develop his version of the title character. And in some moments, it does show, as the Fifth Doctor exhibits traits that don't necessarily crop up too often again. So, whilst 4 to Doomsday may be one of the more underwhelming tales from Season 19, like all Who adventures, it's worth at least one go. Who knows, you may even be surprised, and it could even become your new favourite. Overall, this story attracted an average of 8.9 million viewers, a 0.7 drop from the previous story. This decline was to be expected to some degree, I guess. After the initial buzz and excitement of a new Doctor arriving had worn off, some of the more casual viewers who perhaps weren't taken in with Castrovalva were bound to drop away. But for this often overlooked story to have still brought in nearly 9 million viewers on average, that's hardly a feat to be sniffed at. These days, I find 4 to Doomsday more interesting to watch for the sake of context. Being that this was the first one Peter Davison filmed, it is fascinating to see the small ways in which his Doctor does differ in this story to say others like Castrovalva or later tales like Earthshock. It's not one I revisit often, but like all Doctor Who adventures, it does have its fans. And to see if you'll become one of them, you can read the Target book from 1983 or its audio adaptation from 2017. To watch it, it was released first on VHS back in 2001, and then later as a standalone DVD in 2008. You can also enjoy 4 to Doomsday on Blu-ray, as part of the Season 19 collection set. Whilst not necessarily being essential viewing, 4 to Doomsday is a fun little romp for the TARDIS team. We get some little great moments, and a not too shabby looking space scene towards the end. If you're a Fifth Doctor completionist, then it's one you have to check out. If you aren't, well, give it a chance anyway. It's certainly not boring to sit back and experience.
Oh, we've got to get out of here. We've got to get to the TARDIS and get out of here.
Not yet. Please, will you stop thinking of yourself for
I'm not
once?
thinking of myself. We've got to get to Earth and warn them.
Of what? Who'll believe us? We'll be laughed at.
The third story from Season 19 is Kinder. On the paradise world of Diva Loca, evil lurks in the dark places of the inside. While the Doctor and Adric are prisoners of the planetary survey team, Tegan faces the sinister Mara in a nightmare world. A nightmare that's about to become terrifying reality. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 1st of February 1982 and concluded on the 9th of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, which are almost exactly the same as they were to 4 to Doomsday. Kinder in fact replicates the previous story's peak in viewership, with Part 2 having 9.4 million audience members tuning in. It is reassuring to see the viewing figures hold steady as the season progresses, and whilst they aren't steadily falling, like they were in the first half of Season 18, it would be nice to see them rise, building to the season finale in a few months' time. For the top 40 TV programmes, Kinder wasn't able to take Doctor Who back into the coveted chart. Part 2 was able to come the closest, eventually finishing off at 45th place, whilst Part 1 ended up the furthest away, at 78th. With numbers holding relatively stable for Kinder, were those audiences becoming accustomed to the TARDIS team's new adventures? Or was there something in Kinder specifically that kept them glued to the screen? This serial did boast some wonderful guest stars, including Richard Todd and Nerys Hughes, but you'd hardly know they appeared in the lead up to Kinder's transmission, for there was no special piece of promotion that celebrated their appearance. In the past, entire articles have been devoted to guest actors appearing in Doctor Who, but for Kinder at least, that didn't seem to happen. Whilst the print world of promotion continued to be lacking, there was a small boost from the TV world. Throughout Kinder's transmission, Peter Davison made 2 appearances on the hit game show Call My Bluff, which, whilst not directly tied to Doctor Who, it's arguable that the star's appearance could have helped boost interest somewhat. More interesting was a BBC Schools programme, The Music Arcade, that aired on the day of Part 2's broadcast. In this show was a segment featuring Peter Howell, the composer of the series' title music. Howell demonstrated to audiences how the sequence was put together, and for anyone interested not just in Doctor Who, but electronic music as a whole, it is a fascinating watch. Moving on to Kinder's competition, the other side continued to provide the same lineup, constituting of Wish You Were Here on Mondays, and Now Back to Give Us a Clue on Tuesdays, the celebrity charade show still proving to have some appeal across the ITV regions. But even though Doctor Who was proving to be a success in the weekday evening time slot, there were many members of the public who expressed frustration that the show was no longer going out at Saturday tea time. However, head of programme planning, John Morrell, was quick to rebuttal this, by claiming the move was made as, the series needed a new lease of life. To that end, Kinder complements this new lease of life with a story that is vastly original and is arguably some of the best work of the entire Peter Davison era. It's great to see Tegan, the newest of the 3 companions, really get some good character work here, and Janet Fielding's performance, particularly when she's possessed by the fiendish Mara, is absolutely stunning. Some claim not to understand it or get why it's so revered, which is completely fine, but if you ask me, this is an absolute must-watch if you're treading through the Peter Davison years. Though, if you have a fear of snakes, maybe give it a skip. Overall, this story attracted an average of 8.8 million viewers, a 0.1 drop from the previous story. This average continues the stabilisation of the viewing figures that we saw with the individual episodes, and for your programme's average to be consistently hovering close to the 9 million mark, indeed when the programme in question is over 18 years old, is quite the achievement to say the least. We also have some repeat data for you. Given the Doctor Who was now off the air for 9 months of the year, having repeats was arguably more essential than ever to keep the show in the public eye. As such, Kinder was one of 3 stories from season 19 to get a repeat airing in the summer of 1983, though this one was a last-minute addition. Airing over 4 consecutive days from the 22nd to the 25th of August, 1983, here are the viewing figures for this repeat, which averaged out at 4.4 million viewers, exactly half of the amount who tuned in on original broadcast. In the now traditional vein of summer repeats, the viewing figures are lower for 2 key reasons. The first was the hot summer weather, that kept audiences outside for longer, making it less likely that they were in watching the telly, and second, competition on ITV remained fierce, with soap opera Crossroads proving that a little bit more popular in this instance than the TARDIS team. Kinder stands out as not being just a typical run-of-the-mill adventure. The script by newcomer Christopher Bailey is brimming with wonderful ideas and some excellent scenes, many of which are realised beautifully on the television screen. To experience the wonders of Kinder for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1983, but there's no audio adaptation of it as of yet. However, there is an abridged audio version of the novelisation, released on cassette tape, all the way back in 1997. To watch Kinder, you can check out the VHS release from 1994, or the DVD release from 2011, packaged with Snake Dance as part of the Mara Tales box set. Kinder is also available to enjoy on Blu-ray, as part of the Season 19 collection set. Whilst it may not reach out to everyone, I find Kinder to be one of the more experimental stories of the 1980s. It isn't afraid to really push the boat out in terms of abstract and in some cases quite chilling concepts. And when all of your cast are on form and the production values are looking good, it really lifts the story higher. I say all the production values look good, there is, well, that, but that aside, Kinder is one I highly recommend. As long as you don't mind snakes. Again, perhaps not one for you if you really don't like them.
Oh no! Oh, is that...
Well, we've established one thing.
What?
The Kinder have a sense of humour.
The 4th story from season 19 is The Visitation. The Doctor, Tegan, Nyssa and Adric arrive in England in 1666. There, they meet thespian Richard Mace, with whom they join forces to thwart the plans of a maroon pteroleptal who intends to wipe out human life on Earth with a virus-like plague. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 15th of February 1982 and concluded on the 23rd of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and this is a nice little jump up. All 4 parts of The Visitation gain over 9 million viewers, the first story of season 19 to do so, and part 4 once again takes us past the 10 million mark and finished with around 10.1 million households tuning in to witness the Doctor's part in the Great Fire of London. This is the positive boost I was talking about, with around 1 million more people dipping into the programme during the Visitation's run. For the top 40 TV programmes, Doctor Who just managed to scrape back in at the lowest position possible, with Part 4 charting at 40th place. Parts 2 and 3 came close, finishing at 48th and 41st respectively, and Part 1 falling a little further behind at 54th. So, with this nice little increase in overall viewing figures, what was it about the Visitation that caused these new audience members to tune in? Well, for a start, the competition over at ITV was mostly the same as it was for the previous stories. Some regional programming, and Wish You Were Here on Mondays, with Emmerdale Farm now taking the Tuesday slot in most ITV regions. Though I must admit, the way ITV would change up their Tuesday schedule seemingly by the week is quite surprising, but then the regionalised structure of the network at the time would often result in this. Like with Forward to Doomsday and Kinder, there wasn't a great amount of promotion for the Visitation. The BBC issued some materials in late 1981, highlighting the guest appearance of Michael Robbins as well as the monsters, the Pteroleptals, and their android. Aside from that, there wasn't any big TV appearance or article in the newspapers that actively tried to keep Doctor Who in the spotlight. Perhaps the switch to a 3-month-long season as opposed to 6 months made the BBC feel that they didn't have to sustain the promotional arm for as long. Though, it has to be said, this theory is purely speculation. Whilst being set in the 17th century, the Visitation is far from being what is termed as a pure historical. There's a lot of sci-fi in here, no less from the appearance of the alien Pteroleptal. But this pseudo-historical adventure is one of the best the classic series has to offer. The leading cast are firing off on all cylinders, Michael Robbins is hilarious as Richard Mace, and overall the story moves at quite the pace. By its end, we witness the beginnings of the Great Fire of London, revisiting a notion that some of the memorable moments in history were in some way caused or started by the Doctor. The Visitation is also notable for the destruction of the sonic screwdriver. The device had been featured constantly since its first appearance back in 1968, but the production team felt it had solved far too many a problem. And so, just like K9 beforehand, the sonic screwdriver had to go, and indeed wouldn't be seen again in the programme for another 14 years. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9.6 million viewers, a 0.8 increase from the previous story. The Visitation now ties with Castrovalva for being the highest viewed story of season 19 thus far, and what a worthy tale to share that title with. Whether it was the historical setting, the fabulous guest cast, or the unique new aliens, the Visitation's increased viewership only strengthened the notion that the new Doctor in the new time slot was working. We also have some repeat data for you. The Visitation was chosen as one of 3 stories to be repeated in the summer of 1983. Airing over 4 consecutive days from the 15th to the 18th of August, here are the viewing figures for this repeat, which averaged out at 4.3 million viewers. A 5.3 million drop from original broadcast. Similar to the Kinder repeat we looked at earlier, the same factors affected the Visitation also. Hot summer weather, as well as Crossroads continuing to prove its popularity amongst the general viewing public. The Visitation would be the first of the many pseudo-historical stories that viewers would be treated to throughout the 1980s. And for me, it is definitely one of the best. Penned by incoming script editor Eric Saywood, it would give audiences an insight into how this new writer would craft a Doctor Who adventure. And whilst The Visitation isn't my favourite of Saywood's scripts, I believe it offers a promising insight into what will come over the next few years. If you wish to indulge in The Visitation for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1982, or its audio adaptation from 2012. To watch it, you have a VHS release from 1994, bundled together with Black Orchid. Alternatively, there is a standalone DVD release, which first came out in 2004, before being re-released with new restoration and special features in 2013, marketed as the Special Edition. The Visitation is also available to watch on the Season 19 collection set, which is exclusive to the Blu-ray format. For those who find the pure historicals of the 1960s not to their liking, The Visitation offers an alternative that satisfies in many different categories. It has the rich historical setting that a BBC production can pull off so well, it has the science fiction elements of aliens and androids that both look unique and hold their own menace, and to top it all off, it's supported by a cast who you can tell are enjoying the material they're being given, and they're engaging with the story, and the stakes that it holds, and all the set pieces that it can create. Another must-watch of the Peter Davison era for me, and I hope it becomes one for you too.
Isn't my day, is it? I feel as though you've just killed an old friend.
The 5th story from Season 19 is Black Orchid. In England, 1925, the Doctor wins a cricket match and is invited to a fancy dress ball at Cranleigh Hall. But the Cranleigh family hides a dark secret, and the party mood is soon shattered when a murder is discovered. This story is comprised of 2 episodes, which began airing on the 1st of March 1982 and concluded the following day on the 2nd of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for both episodes, and those numbers just keep on climbing. The viewing figures between the two parts are so agonisingly close together, with Part 2 beating out Part 1 ever so slightly, with 10.1 million viewers tuning in. Part 1 trails very closely behind, with 9.9 million households watching the opening instalment. For a shorter two-part story, for around 10 million viewers to be watching is a lovely little achievement. In regard to the top 40 TV programmes, both parts sadly miss out on a place within the chart. Part 1 finishes at 57th, whilst Part 2 inches a little bit higher, closing off at 55th place. So, how did Black Orchid manage to gain some of the highest viewing figures of the season, despite being half the length of all the preceding stories? Well, thankfully, promotion for this story saw a vast improvement over many of the previous tales of Season 19. In the TV world, a section of Black Orchid was previewed back in the December of 1981, as part of children's magazine show Blue Peter. The clip used was part of the dance sequence in Part 1, as the Blue Peter team were doing a film report about the costumers, Bermans and Nathans. Bringing things back up to speed, the Saturday before Part 1's transmission saw the Daily Mail promoting the appearance of guest star Barbara Murray, and the magazine Titbits offered a 2-page colour spread on Doctor Who, featuring an interview with one of the main stars, Janet Fielding, who dramatically teased Tegan's fate at the end of the season, stating that Tegan is left in a will she won't she escape cliffhanger. That certainly sounds enticing and interesting, but more on that when we get there. Over on the other side at ITV, competition was beginning to change up a bit. Whilst Emmerdale Farm was back facing Doctor Who on Tuesdays, on Mondays Doctor Who went against bits of the ITV News, Nature Watch, and also one of the network's highest rated shows, Crossroads. When pitted against this show before, mainly via summer repeats, Doctor Who typically lost out to the staff of the famous motel. However, it seems on this occasion, audiences were remaining loyal to the Time Lord. A relief in a way, as the popularity of Crossroads could have potentially seen millions switch channels to the other side. Black Orchid is a sharp little tale told across 50 minutes. It was the first two-part story since 1975's The Sontaran Experiment, and whilst two-parters in Classic Who are relatively uncommon, it doesn't mean that they can't work. It's not one of my favourites. I'm not a huge fan of the 1920s upper-class setting, but there are many parts of the serial that really do succeed. Namely the costumes of the day, which the BBC had a stellar reputation for delivering on, and the sense of fun that pervades much of Part 1. In many respects, I'm glad it's just two parts, as I think a 4-part structure would have dragged things out, and even though it's not one I revisit often, I still recognise its strengths, as do the many millions who absolutely adore it. Overall, this story attracted an average of 10 million viewers, a 0.4 increase from the previous story. This means Black Orchid now takes the title of being the highest viewed story of Season 19 thus far, and marking the first time Doctor Who averaged 10 million since The Creature from the Pit back in 1979. This average feels like a statement, a testament to not only the programme's enduring popularity, but that as the world entered the 1980s properly, Doctor Who still very much had a place within the TV schedules. We also have some repeat data for you. Black Orchid was the last of 3 stories to get a repeat airing in the summer of 1983. Going out on the 31st of August and the 1st of September, here are the viewing figures for this repeat, which averaged out at 4.7 million viewers, a 5.3 million drop from the original broadcast. This repeat was going out against soap opera Crossroads and some regional news programmes, just as the other 2 repeated stories did. Plus, the summer weather in the UK made it so audiences were less inclined to catch a repeat and more tempted to catch a tan. Black Orchid may not be my favourite two-parter of the classic series, but its relatively straightforward style has held great appeal amongst fans over the years. Whether it's the beautiful costumes, the whodunit style plotline, or even just the fact that you can breeze through it in under an hour, the serial manages to cater to a wide variety of the audience demographic. To see whether it caters to you, you can read the Target book from 1986, or its audio adaptation from 2008. To watch it, you have the 1994 VHS release, which bundles the story with the Visitation. Alternatively, you can enjoy it via a standalone DVD release from 2008. Black Orchid is also available on Blu-ray, thanks to the 2018 release of the Season 19 collection set. With 10 million viewers tuning in, Black Orchid stands as being one of the definitive successes from Season 19, especially from a viewing figures standpoint. So if you have 50 minutes spare, dig out your period piece costume, put on your dancing shoes, and get out on the patio for a wee jig. Or you can do an Adric and eat everything in sight. That's completely valid too.
Oh, well bowled!
The sixth and penultimate story from Season 19 is Earthshock. The TARDIS arrives on Earth just in time for the Doctor to foil a plot by the Cybermen to destroy the planet. But the Cybermen have a backup plan, and not everyone will survive the fight against them to save the world. This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 8th of March 1982 and concluded on the 16th of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and whilst no single episode is able to break 10 million, these numbers are still very impressive and consistent with most of Season 19 thus far. Part 3 heralds the peak viewership, with 9.8 million viewers tuning in, and Part 2 saw the lowest point, with 8.8 million, which quite frankly is still a very strong figure to boast on a Tuesday evening. When looking at the top 40 programmes, Doctor Who was finally once again able to make a bit more of a dent in the charts. Part 4 scrapes in at 40th place, but Part 3 pushes its way higher up the chart, finishing at 32nd. And even though Parts 1 and 2 miss out on a place, it's not by all that much. So how did Earthshock manage to continually sustain its viewership throughout its 4 episodes? Well, the answer may seem obvious to those who know this story, but we'll come to that in just a bit. To start with, competition over at ITV was once again virtually the same as with previous stories. Wish You Were Here went out on Mondays, and Emmerdale Farm on Tuesdays, both of which had their loyal audiences of course, but failed in stealing more sizable viewership away from Doctor Who. Publicity on the other hand was a bit quieter to start with, although this time there was actually a justified reason. Earthshock was the story to bring back the Cybermen, one of the most popular monsters in all of Doctor Who. The creatures hadn't been seen on screens for around 7 years, and this time they were back with a new design, new voice, and a whole new kind of menace. But producer John Nathan Turner wanted to keep the Cybermen's return a secret for as long as possible. He had the viewing galleries blacked out when the serial was recording, and he even went as far as to turn down a front cover opportunity for the Radio Times, something which could have been seen as a risky move. However, I think it's fair to say that his gamble paid off. The Cybermen were revealed at the end of Part 1, and even though audiences dipped slightly for Part 2, by Part 3 1 million more viewers were tuning in. The return of the metal monsters now out in the open, and being circulated around playgrounds and offices alike. Earthshock did eventually receive a back page article in the Radio Times promoting the Cybermen's comeback, and between Parts 2 and 3, a clip from the serial, as well as many clips from throughout the show's history, were featured on the BBC Two review programme Did You See? Peter Davison also gave an interview on popular chat show Pebble Mill at 1, mostly to promote his new book, Peter Davison's Book of Alien Monsters, but throughout the interview, clips from Earthshock were shown. By initially keeping it a secret, the return of the Cybermen heralded much press and viewer attention, generating a certain excitement for Doctor Who that had arguably been missing for some years. Earthshock is an excellent story in its own right too. Not only are the Cybermen back, but we get some wonderful action pieces, atmospheric environments, and a set of stakes that genuinely feel tense and build naturally to an explosive conclusion. The serial was also notable for the departure of companion Adric. Having felt 3 in the TARDIS was a bit too many, producer JNT decreed 1 had to go. Adric ultimately was chosen, and rather than simply shake hands and leave, he was to go out in a blaze of glory, the character dying at the story's conclusion. A companion dying, especially in Classic Who, is a rarity indeed, and Adric's death is handled so heartbreakingly well. Him and the Doctor being separated, him staying aboard to crack the code, and the tragedy of him never knowing whether or not he was right. It feels impactful, and to this day remains such an iconic, yet crushing moment from the programme's near 60-year history. Overall, this story attracted an average of 9.3 million viewers, a 0.7 drop from the previous story. Whilst it is a little surprising to see the average drop despite the return of the Cybermen, for their return to garner an average this high is a testament to their enduring popularity. Despite having not been on screen for 7 years, the reputation and impact of the creatures was still carried across to viewers of all ages. We also have some repeat data for you. Due to the premature ending of American import Brett Maverick, 6 50-minute slots became available, which were duly given to reruns of Doctor Who, titled under the banner Doctor Who and the Monsters. Earthshock was the last of 3 stories to transmit in this repeat season, beginning on Monday the 9th of August and concluding the following week. Here are the viewing figures for this repeat, which averaged out at 5.1 million viewers, a 4.2 million drop from original broadcast. These figures may seem low, and indeed they are, but I would argue this result is commendable for a few reasons. For one, the hot summer weather always brought viewing figures lower down across all channels, but more noticeably, the Earthshock repeat went out against ITV's most popular and longest running soap opera, Coronation Street. This show was a ratings juggernaut, and had been since it began all the way back in 1960. but whilst triumphing over Doctor Who this time, considering it was fighting a repeat, it wasn't that noteworthy. However, this wouldn't be the last time the Doctor would go up against the famous cast of The Rover's Return. Whether it's the return of the Cybermen, to witness Adric's final end, or just for a cracking good action story, Earthshock well and truly delivers. It's written by Eric Saywood, who wrote The Visitation and will become script editor on Doctor Who for several years. He carries across a darker tone, filled with death, doom and destruction, but doesn't forget to include lighter moments, perfectly encapsulating the balance that Doctor Who can do so very well in the right circumstances. So, to experience this absolute classic for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1983, or its audio adaptation from 2012. To watch it, you have a VHS release from 1992, or a standalone DVD release from 2003. Or, if you like your Blu-rays, you can enjoy Earthshock on the format as part of the Season 19 collection set. It's a classic Who story that gets talked about a lot for a reason. It was able to perfectly reintroduce the Cybermen, whilst giving a companion one of the most memorable exits in the show's history. I also think it's a great introduction in many ways to classic Who. It was one of the very first adventures I sat down to watch, and it remains just as good now as it did the first time around. I'm sure it's a story you'll love, so sit down and give it a try. Otherwise I'll never know if I was right.
My army awaits, Doctor!
The seventh and final story from Season 19 is Time Flight. When a Concorde vanishes mid-flight, the Doctor tracks it down to Earth's prehistoric past, where the crew and passengers have become the slaves of the mysterious saucer, Khalid. But who is Khalid really? This story is comprised of 4 episodes, which began airing on the 22nd of March 1982 and concluded on the 30th of the same month. Here are the individual viewing figures for all 4 episodes, and here we can see quite an interesting run of events. Part 1 starts out strong, pulling in exactly 10 million viewers, but from Part 2 onwards, the serial sees quite the slump in viewership. Granted, all of the figures are above 8 million, which is a strong showing, but it is curious to see over 1 million people dive out of the story so quickly. In terms of the top 40 programmes chart, Doctor Who was able to gain a footing one last time this season, Part 1 attaining the highest chart position not just for this story, but for Season 19 as a whole, at 26th place. Parts 2 and 3 just missed out on a place, and Part 4 falls the furthest behind at 64th. Why then did viewers decide to duck out of Time Flight so quickly? Was there something specific that turned them away? Competition could have had something to do with it, even in a minimal sense. For Tuesday nights, Give Us a Clue was back on against Doctor Who, but on Mondays, holiday programme Wish You Were Here was finally pushed aside in favour of Crossroads. As mentioned previously, this soap had defeated Doctor Who in the summer seasons, and perhaps its popularity provided a conflict for some viewers who were interested in both programmes. Promotional efforts in the papers didn't make much of an event of Time Flight, though the Daily Mirror ran a small item on the show on the day of Part 1's broadcast that is mainly focused on Adric's cameo appearance in Part 2, rather than the actual plotline itself. Though on the television, Doctor Who, or rather its lead actor Peter Davison, was to be the focus of quite an important accolade. Shortly before Time Flight began transmission, JNT phoned up Peter asking him if he could make himself available to shoot a Season 19 promo for Australia. This promo would be shot on location in Trafalgar Square, with the TARDIS, Daleks and Cybermen all making an appearance. To his surprise, Peter arrived to see his 3 companions and the Master exiting the TARDIS, followed shortly by Eamon Andrews, who proclaimed to an astonished Davison, "This is your life." This show had been on and off the air since 1955, and focused on celebrating the lives of individuals in a variety of different fields. Being only 30 years old, this made Peter one of the youngest receivers of what is known as the Big Red Book. This edition was broadcast between parts 2 and 3 of Time Flight over on ITV, and given this is your life's wide audience, it could only serve as a promotional boost for Doctor Who. And indeed, Part 3 did see an audience increase of 0.4 million from Part 2, though putting this solely down to This Is Your Life is of course just a theory. Another theory relates to why Doctor Who lost 1.5 million viewers between Parts 1 and 2. Given that Adric's death had been so monumental, perhaps audiences expected a chunk of the next serial to focus on the aftermath of the event. However, bar the first scene in the TARDIS in Part 1, and then a cameo in Part 2, Adric is all but swept aside by story's end. This partly is down to the structure and serialised nature of Doctor Who at that time, but perhaps not focusing on this big event more caused some audience members to switch off or switch over to the offerings on ITV. Time Flight itself, sadly, isn't really celebrated, both at the time and indeed even now. It is impressive in some respects, featuring a then state-of-the-art Concorde airplane, and making Doctor Who the first drama to be allowed permission to film at Heathrow Airport. That aside, a lot of the story elements, props, and effects aren't realised to the best quality. We must forgive it to some extent, as by the time Time Flight began production, the budget was all but running out for the season. Furthermore, it seems that certain production team members and BBC higher-ups were more concerned with shoeing in the Concorde and Heathrow elements rather than the actual plotline at hand. We do see the Master turn up again, played once more by the wonderful Anthony Ainley, but out of his 2 appearances in Season 19, this is without a doubt the weakest. More than anything, Time Flight feels more like a novelty these days, rather than an example of a good story. It does have its fans, and I certainly don't think it's the worst kind of Who that there is, but especially coming hot off the heels of Earthshock, it almost did seem a little too destined to fail from the start. Overall, the story attracted an average of 8.9 million viewers, a 0.4 drop from the previous story. This drop hardly seems surprising, given the slump the serial experienced throughout its 4 episodes, but to be honest, despite all the adventure's misgivings and problems, the fact it came out with a near 9 million average is certainly impressive. It may not be revered as one of the greats, and indeed it does have its fair share of issues, but if there's one thing that Time Flight does have, it's a solid slice of entertainment. I don't get bored watching this story, but it isn't one from Season 19 that I revisit with any great hurry. If you wish to revisit it for yourself, you can read the Target book from 1983, or its audio adaptation from 2021. To watch it, the story was first released on VHS back in 2000, before appearing on the DVD format in 2007, packaged together with Arc of Infinity as a double release set. Time Flight is also available on Blu-ray, thanks to the Season 19 collection set. Like any Who adventure, it's certainly worth trying at least once, but if you're coming off the heels of Earthshock and expecting this story to hold the same quality and impact, then I'm afraid you're going to be a little bit disappointed.
It's only imagination. It's the only power Khalid has left to stop us.
If you advance, you will kill me, Nyssa.
So that's Season 19, the 7 stories that comprise it, and the ratings that they garnered. With the transmission of Episode 4 of Time Flight, Season 19 was brought to an end, concluding a near 3-month run, comprised of 26 episodes across 7 stories. Now, let's have a look at the story averages for this season. We can see that across its 7 adventures, that Season 19 did quite well in the viewing figures department. All 7 stories had at least 8 million people watching. Compare that to Season 18, whose peak viewership average was just below that at 7.5 million. The most successful story is Black Orchid, which had 10 million households on average watching, though it probably helped that it only had 2 episodes to average instead of 4. The least viewed story is Kinder, which had 8.8 million viewers on average, but again, that's higher than every story from Season 18, and also a great deal higher than many adventures from the late 1960s and early 1970s. In short, Doctor Who was back in the game, achieving consistently strong viewing figures, with audiences continually delighted and enthralled in the TARDIS team's travels through to space and time. Now, as we always do, let's work out the overall average for this season. By combining the average ratings for each story, we can calculate that the average viewing figures for Season 19 of Doctor Who stands at around roughly 9.3 million viewers, a lovely 3.5 million increase from the previous season's average. This is a much healthier result than Season 18, and brings Doctor Who back to the impressive form seen in the early days of the Tom Baker era. And hopefully, it convinced the BBC bosses that the radical change in Doctor, TARDIS team, and the shift in broadcast dates were all an unbridled success. In terms of Season 19's position, compared to the 18 that came before it, it charts as the 4th most viewed season of Doctor Who thus far, behind 4 Tom Baker seasons and Season 2 from William Hartnell's time. Despite the programme's age, rapidly approaching its 20th birthday, it could still pack quite a punch with the viewing public. Season 19 managed to bring Doctor Who right back to being one of the television staples. Audiences returned in their millions to witness the debut of the fresh-faced 5th Doctor, and most of that audience stuck around, to join him, Adric, Nyssa and Tegan on a series of unique and exciting adventures. We went back to the past, dabbled with some more abstract and engaging concepts, whilst also seeing the return of one of the show's most iconic adversaries, only to be punched right in the gut with the death of Adric. Season 19, if anything, really did diversify itself into trying to offer something for all kinds of viewers, and the time slot shift to Mondays and Tuesdays, although scorned by some, undoubtedly helped bring in the millions of viewers that Season 18 had struggled to hold on to. And as Time Flight concluded, we were left on a new cliffhanger. As Tegan watched the TARDIS fade away, audiences must have been left wondering, was that the end of her time on the programme? Well, they would have to wait 9 agonising months to find out. But would that following season, set to broadcast in the 20th anniversary year no less, Not only answer this question, but would it keep pushing those viewing figures higher and higher, perhaps past 10 million? Or would audiences drop off in favour of new competition, or from becoming disenchanted with the programme, just as they had done only a year previously? You'll have to tune in next time to find out. So those are the ratings details for Season 19. I hope you enjoyed this numerical look back at the Fifth Doctor's first year of adventures, which really embraced the new, whilst keeping and reinventing dashes of the old, often to great success. If you want to see more Doctor Who content, then I highly recommend you check out Jack Reeves. He makes some truly wonderful videos, such as his Doctor Who Road series, and I really think you'll enjoy them too. If you want to read more about Doctor Who and the making of it, I highly recommend the Complete History series of books, which I used as reference for this video. If you want to keep up to date with this series, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram, and if you want to see new episodes of the series early, then you can by supporting me on Patreon or via my Ko-fi page. Please consider leaving a like, subscribing to the channel, and leaving your thoughts on Season 19 in the comments section below. I've been Adam Martyn from AMTV, and we will see you next time for Season 20.